space-time, and which is self-existent. To fail to grasp such an idea is to fail to grasp what God is, end quote. In other words, once we understand that God is the uncaused, spaceless, timeless creator of the universe, you can see that it's meaningless or trivial to say, what is the cause of an uncaused being? That's like cracking your brain wondering, why is it that all bachelors that I meet are unmarried? Why aren't there any married bachelors? See, it's part of the concept. It's conceptually necessary that a bachelor is an unmarried male. Similarly, it's conceptually necessary that a timeless, spaceless, self-existent being doesn't have a cause. So unless Philip can show some sort of absurdity in saying that there is a timeless, spaceless, self-existent being, I think we have good grounds for believing that there is a personal creator of the universe who is timeless, spaceless, changeless, immaterial, and who brought the universe into being out of nothing. A conclusion which is consistent with and suggestive of the position that all of the great monotheistic faiths have held long before the discovery of Big Bang cosmology or any of the evidence that I've shared with you today. And therefore, I am persuaded that theism is the most rational and plausible view that an intelligent thinking person in the 21st century can hold. Thank you.
What's the point of postulating an answer which is in itself a huge question? What's the point of coming up with an argument which cannot be dealt with? Ladies and gentlemen, when I was a little boy, when I was 5, and I was struggling with this issue, which would dominate my life for many, many years, I would regress back to the beginning, the postulated beginning that my father, the Christian minister, spoke about from his pulpit. And I'd insist that there had to be something before that beginning. And before that, and before that, and before that. Just as I discovered from that painful bouncing off the great rocky vault above the ceiling of my sleep out, that there couldn't be an end. And I was fascinated by Christianity's lopsidedness. Christianity taught me in Sunday school that there had to be a beginning, but there couldn't be an end. There had to be a moment of detonation, creation, whatever. This is long before, of course, Big Bang Theory. There had to be a beginning which God would create, but there couldn't be an ending. And this seemed to me to be inelegant. If there can't be an ending, and there can't be because we've got to live and dwell in paradise through all eternity, why does there have to be a beginning? So at that age, it seemed to me that the beginning was a redundant notion, that it was much more harmonious and evenly balanced to live in a universe, in a cosmos, which was endless, both ends, with time and space being mirror images of each other. If you introduce a beginning and you insist that it was begun by God, the question that I asked myself and that Bertrand Russell asked himself cannot be thrown aside with clever little metaphors about rabbits and hats and magicians. We know that the magician pulls a rabbit out of the hat, and we know where the magician came from. In the one breath, this gentleman tells us that it is intellectually inadequate, intellectually inferior, trivial, to not be able to grasp the notion of an endless, existing, pre-existing thing, object, no, not object, presence, spirit, whatever. And at the same time, insists that because there has to be a beginning, that is going to be the proof of what happened before. It's cyclic, it doesn't get you anywhere, it makes you giddy, it doesn't help. You have to accept the fact that it is possible to postulate a universe, many universes, that just go on and on. Now the Big Bang is one theory, and it's a theory that at the moment a majority of scientists hold to, but it's losing ground. But when I was growing up and I heard about the Big Bang, it seemed to me that why not have an endless oscillation? I think Bill mentioned this very briefly, an endless oscillation of Big Bangs, where the universe expands, reaches the point predestined by the second law of thermodynamics, where everything dies, and then falls back in on itself, and bang, off it goes again. So I imagine, therefore, an infinite regression and progression of Big Bangs, that there have always been Big Bangs and always will be, that they simply will go on through all eternity, rather like pearls on a necklace, on a long necklace string. There are new theories, however, that come out of the struggle, the rather hubristic struggle to find a theory for everything. We've gone from particles, we've gone from the subatomic world to string theory. We're now moving from string theory to M theory, membrane theory, or brains, which argues that the only way to make the maths work, which have been tantalising scientists ever since Big Bang theory and Einstein, is to postulate an infinity of universes, not sequentially, but all at once. And perhaps we'll deal with this in the next lecture. There is currently an argument gaining enormous power that the answer lies in the fact that there's not just this universe, but an infinity of others, and that they coexist with ours. They're in this room. We can't see them. We can't feel them. Some of them you are in, others you are not. Some of them you are in with a different name. Some of them the maths didn't work out at that moment of gestation, and nothing happens at that. But the way M theory, which is now linked to string theory, which is linked to E equals mc squared, into a very powerful idea that many scientists believe has got us on the edge of the theory of everything, which will explain the totality of creation. The way it's going is that there may be billions and billions and billions of universes in which this is just one tiny effervescent event. Now, I find the whole concept of God and that evaporates once again. There is no beginning, there is no end. It just goes on and on forever in a scale that is simply staggering, far beyond the imaginative scale of monotheistic faiths. And I have to say in parenthesis before I sit down again, that it's fascinating that Bill makes this argument for the existence of God, talking about the Big Bang and matters arising, which would have got him burnt at the stake as a heretic by fellow Christians not so long ago. And it's a great pleasure that I observe that I can be here today talking to you and mounting counter-arguments, which also would have got me tortured by the Inquisition and put to death. So I suppose we're making some progress. I doubt that we're going to resolve this issue in the next 30 minutes. It has been tantalising and making people's heads ache for thousands of years. And just as no atheist can ever prove that there is no God, no theist has ever proved there is. In fact, I remind you of that wonderful statement by Douglas Adams, my famous namesake, in his Testament, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. We are dealing with a God who refuses to prove himself. I don't find that God necessary. I don't have to prove anything. The proof has to lie with those who postulate, not with those who reject. Thank you.
In my closing statement, I'd like to draw together some of the threads of the debate to see what conclusions we might draw. First, I think it's evident that in this afternoon's debate, we've not heard any good reasons to think that atheism is true. At best, if my argument fails today, we're left with agnosticism. But we've seen no good reason to think that God does not exist. What about the reason that I gave to think that theism is true? Well, first of all, I argued that the universe had a beginning. And my philosophical argument has gone unrefuted in today's debate. So even if the scientific evidence failed, we still have the scientific argument against, or the philosophical argument against the infinitude of the past. But what about that scientific evidence? Well, here Philip suggests in his last speech two possible models that are aimed at averting the absolute beginning predicted by the standard model. First, he suggests the oscillating model, which contracts and expands forever. I dealt with that, however, in my first speech. The oscillating model was popular back in the 1960s, but it's no longer defended today because it contradicts the singularity theorems developed by Hawking and Penrose. Stephen Hawking, in his 1997 book, The Nature of Space and Time, says, the Hawking-Penrose singularity theorem led to the abandonment of attempts to argue that there was a previous contracting phase and a non-singular bounce into expansion. Instead, almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. So it turned out that these oscillating models have an infinite future perhaps, but only a finite past.